The stars above Relay Station 9 were calm. Dust drifted through space like old memories. In the quiet corner of the galaxy, the human outpost floated alone, watching signals from far systems. Most of the time, it picked up nothing but static or empty echoes. But today was different. Operator Juno sat in the control chair, half asleep. He had been listening to the same weak pulses for hours. He sipped his cold tea, tapped a few buttons, and stretched his back. Just then, a soft chime rang through the control room. A signal, faint, strained. Ancient equipment hissed with life as the signal came through the filters. Juno frowned. He turned up the audio, trying to understand the strange sound. It was not human, not mechanical either. A voice spoke slowly, broken by static. "Please, help us. We are under attack. We are not soldiers. We have no weapons." Juno's eyes widened. He sat up straight. The voice was full of fear. It trembled, like a child lost in the dark. Behind the voice, distant explosions could be heard. Cries, fire, panic. The message repeated. The words were always the same. Over and over, he traced the signal to its source. It came from the Varana system, a place far from any human settlement, a place no one visited anymore. Juno sent the recording straight to Earth Command with the tag, Emergency, Distress from Unknown Species. Hours passed. Somewhere deep in space, in the command ship Iron Glance, Commander Rovan listened to the same signal. His face was hard, carved by years of service. He had seen war. He had heard distress calls before. But this one was different. These people were not asking for weapons. They were not begging for revenge. They were crying for safety, for mercy, and they sounded like they had no one else to ask. Rovan stood from his chair. His crew watched him in silence. "Where is it from?" he asked. "Varana system," answered Mila, his communication officer. "Species name is unknown. Language decoded through auto-translator. They call themselves the Tenari. They are peaceful by nature. No military records, no defense systems." "And who is attacking them?" "We believe it's the Zarkeen Dominion," Mila said. "They're expanding. No warning, no rules, no honor." Rovan looked at the stars through the window. The Zarkeen were not new to him. He had fought them years ago. Brutal, fast, without mercy. They took what they wanted and burned what they couldn't hold. "Has the council responded?" he asked. "They're discussing," Mila replied. "They say it's outside our area. They want more reports, more proof." Rovan turned away. He had heard those words before. Every time someone cried for help, the council sat in circles and talked. And by the time they made a decision, the crying had stopped. Not because help arrived, but because the voices were gone. He walked back to his command seat and sat down. "Send a message to High Command," Rovan said. "Tell them Iron Glance is moving to Varana." "With whose permission?" Mila asked quietly. Rovan looked at her with calm eyes. "With mine." The bridge fell silent. Then, without delay, orders were sent. Lights came alive across the ship. Engines powered up. Weapons charged. Other nearby human ships began to receive the same signal. Some waited. Others did not. One by one, vessels answered the silent call of their commander. On the other side of the galaxy, the Tenari hid in the remains of their city. Their buildings, once bright and full of songs, now lay broken. Smoke rose into their sky. The ground shook under the sound of Zarkeen tanks. Their skies were filled with shadows. Avara, a young Tenari healer, helped carry the wounded into an underground shelter. Her hands shook. Her face was covered in dust and tears. She looked up at the small radio transmitter still blinking. "Do you think anyone heard us?" a child asked her. Avara wanted to say yes. She wanted to say help was coming. But she had seen how the galaxy worked. The Council listened only when it was easy. The others feared the Zarkeen. She looked down at the child and gave a small smile. "I hope so," she said softly. Above them, a Zarkeen cruiser dropped fire over another part of the city. The Tenari waited. Back on the Iron Glance, Rovan stood before a screen. A map showed the Varana system. Red lights marked known Zarkeen forces. Human ships were still hours away, but Rovan did not wait. He opened a message channel. His voice was deep, steady, and clear. "This is Commander Rovan of the United Human Fleet. We have received your call. We are coming." He paused, thinking of what else to say. These people were strangers. They had never met humans. They didn't know what Deathworlders were. They didn't know what it meant when Earth answered a call, but they would. Rovan continued, "You are not alone. Stay strong. Hold on. We are not diplomats. We are not traitors. We are not peacekeepers. We are the line. We are the storm." The message was sent. Far ahead, in the dark between stars, the warships of humanity began to move faster. Faster than fear, faster than hope. The old engines roared with life. Generations of warriors had trained for this moment. The Tenari had cried for help, but Deathworlders did not come with words. They came with fire. The meeting hall of the Galactic Council was large and full of light. Tall glass walls showed the stars outside. Dozens of species sat around a glowing round table. Some were tall and thin, others short with many arms or wings. They wore fine clothes and badges of peace. At the center, the speaker of the council, a blue-skinned elder named Volarin, raised his hand. "We have received a message," Volarin said. "It is from a species called the Tenari. They ask for help. Their world is under attack by the Zarkeen." The room became quiet. A few members looked uncomfortable. Others looked away. One counselor, a bird-like being with golden feathers, spoke first. "Varana is far," he said. "It is not under our protection. The cost of action would be high." Another, with green scales, added, "We must think carefully. If we move against the Zarkeen, it could lead to war. Many systems could suffer." Volarin nodded slowly. "Then we will open discussion. We must study the situation, prepare reports, wait for clear facts." They talked for hours, but they never said yes. They never said no. They only waited. Far away in the human warship Iron Glance, Commander Rovan sat in his chair. His screen showed the same message from the Council. Words full of delay, careful words, soft excuses. Rovan said nothing at first. He read the message twice, Then he stood and faced his officers. "They are doing nothing," he said. As expected, Mila, his communication officer, looked tired. "We could wait for more orders. We are not supposed to act without them." Rovan looked out at the stars. "How many times have we heard that?" he asked. How many cries for help were answered with, "Silence?" No one replied. "I will not wait," Rovan said. "We move forward. Any ship that wants to return may leave. But Iron Glance is going to Varana." None of his crew moved. They had all seen the signal. They had heard the fear in the Tenari's voice. These were not soldiers, not fighters, just people who wanted to live. Mila gave a small nod. "Then we go." On the red surface of Mars, in a quiet military base, other captains received the same signal. One of them was Captain Relo, who commanded the Skyhammer, a powerful dreadnought. He listened to the message. Then he looked at his crew. "Commander, Rovan is already moving," he said. "No orders from Earth. No council support. But he's going." "Do we follow?" asked his pilot. Relo did not speak for a moment. He looked at a photo on the wall. It was old, a memory from Earth. It showed a group of Tenari visitors, peaceful artists who had once come to share music and art with humans. They had smiled, trusting, hopeful. "Yes," Relo said at last, "we follow." Across space, human ships began to wake. Old cruisers came online, fast carriers left dry docks, even some civilian ships joined in. Transport pilots, medics, engineers, they loaded supplies, fuel, and courage. In every corner of the human systems, something powerful began to move. Not for money, not for power, but because someone had cried for help, and humans remembered how that felt. Back on the Tenari homeworld, the situation was getting worse. Zarkeen soldiers walked the streets. Tenari buildings burned. Their air was full of smoke and fear. In a hidden valley, Ivara, the young healer, moved through a group of injured Tenari. She gave water, cleaned wounds, and held the hands of those who cried. She had not slept in 2 days. Her hands were shaking, but she did not stop. Beside her, an older Tenari named Laren was fixing the broken radio. "Is the message still sending?" Ivara asked. Laren nodded. "It repeats every 10 minutes. Do you think anyone will come?" Laren looked at the small blinking light. "I don't know," he said. "But I think someone heard us. I believe it." In the distance, the sky lit up with fire again. A Zarkeen ship had destroyed another city. The Tenari could only hide and hope. In space, Commander Rovan's fleet was growing. 7 warships had joined him. Then 10, then 15. The fleet moved fast, cutting through space, like a blade. Inside the ships, soldiers trained in silence. Engineers checked every bolt. Pilots reviewed flight paths. They all knew this mission was different. They were not invading. They were not defending their own world. They were answering a call that no one else would. Rovan stood on the bridge, watching the stars pass by. Mila walked over. "We received another council message," she said. "They ask us to stop. They say we are risking peace." Rovan gave a small smile. "They're wrong," he said. "Peace is already gone. It burned with the Tenari cities. We are not risking peace. We are saving it. Mila nodded. Then I'll send our response. Rovan looked at her. No need for long words. Just send this. He spoke clearly. We heard them. Back in the council hall, the members read Rovan's message. It was short, strong, without politics. Some were shocked, some were angry, but a few, just a few, felt something else. Respect. Because while they talked, others had acted, and far away in the dark of space, hope began to rise again. The sky above Earth was no longer quiet. From the oceans of the blue planet to the frozen rings of Saturn, something great was happening. Ships were launching. Engines burned bright. Across every human colony, warships were waking from deep sleep. On the cold surface of Europa, a giant hangar opened. Inside was a ship older than most, painted with battle marks from wars long past. It was called the Storm Hand. It had not flown for 20 years. But today, it would rise again. Inside the hangar, 10, a young engineer with quick hands and sharp eyes, wiped the sweat from his forehead. He stood in front of the Storm Hand's fusion core. It glowed with quiet power. Core is stable, 10 said into his comm. She's ready. His voice shook a little. This was his first real mission, but he knew why he was here. He had seen the Tenari signal. He had watched their cities fall on the screen. His family had once been saved by strangers. Now it was time to return that kindness. Across the solar system, ships like the Storm Hand were being prepared. Engineers, soldiers, pilots, and medics, all, moved with focus and fire. They were not told to act. They chose to. On the main human military station orbiting Mars, Captain Relo stood on the bridge of the Skyhammer. His ship was the largest in the sector. Built for defense, powered by heavy plasma cannons, it could stand against fleets. Rilo looked at the screen in front of him. A map showed the human ships heading toward the Varana system. There were now over 20. Big and small. Old and new. More were joining every hour. He opened a channel to his fleet. This is Captain Relo. The Tenari did not ask for war. They asked for help. We will not fail them. We fly in unity. We fight with purpose. Let the stars remember us not as conquerors, but as guardians. The message was sent. The ships moved into formation. Aboard the Iron Glance, Commander Rovan watched the growing fleet with calm eyes. He had hoped a few ships would follow. He had not expected this many. It meant something had changed. Humans had once been feared. They were called Deathworlders because their home was wild and dangerous. Other species avoided them, but humans had learned from their pain. They had learned to protect. Rovan stood beside Mila, who was monitoring communications. Ship count has passed 35, Mila said. Even a few civilian transports have joined, mostly carrying medical teams. Any word from Earth Command? Rovan asked. They sent a short reply. No orders, just 2 words. What are they? Stay sharp. Rovan smiled for the first time in days. Then let's move. In a small fighter craft docked inside the Storm Hand, Pilot Yair sat in silence. He was a quiet man with calm eyes. His name was known in old battle records, though few had seen him in years. He had once led missions across asteroid fields and returned without a scratch. He had retired long ago, but the Tenari signal had reached him, just like the others. He put on his helmet, checked his systems, and whispered to himself, "Some things are worth flying for." As the fleet moved closer to the Varana system, the ships ran quiet drills. Defense systems were tested. Supplies were checked again and again. There was no music, no celebration, only focus. They knew what they were walking into. The Zarkeen were not traitors or pirates. They were conquerors. Their ships were fast, their weapons cruel, their tactics had no mercy. They had already taken 4 systems in the last year. Varana was only their next step. But now, humanity stood in their path. Inside the Iron Glance, a special room was prepared for strategy. Rovan stood before a large screen that showed Varana's map. Red dots marked Zarkeen warships. There were more than expected. "They're setting up for full control," Mila said. "Most Tenari cities are damaged. A few still hold. Some Tenari have gone underground. We have reports of shelters near the northern valleys." "Any safe zones?" "None." Rovan nodded. "Then we make one." He turned to his crew. "Begin. Operation Shield Rise. We move in 3 phases. First, clear the outer space. Second, block the Zarkeen reinforcements. Third, land support teams to protect the survivors." The officers saluted. Back on the Tenari homeworld, night had fallen. The sky was thick with smoke. Fires glowed like fallen stars. Inside an old school building turned shelter, Ivara tried to comfort the children. She sang a soft song in the Tenari language. Her voice shook, but the children listened. For a moment, the world outside felt far away. Then, the old radio blinked. Ivara ran to it. A new message played. "This is the United. Human fleet, we are approaching Varana. Help is coming. Stay strong." She dropped to her knees. Her hands covered her mouth. Tears fell down her cheeks, not from fear, but from something she had almost forgotten. Hope. In space, the human fleet reached the edge of the Varana system. The stars ahead were darker. Zarkeen ships floated like shadows. They had seen the fleet. Their weapons turned. Their engines flared. But the humans did not slow down. From the Iron Glance, Rovan gave his command. All ships, battle mode, shields up, weapons ready. He paused and looked at the screen. Ahead were cities in flames. Behind him were ships full of brave souls. This is not just another mission. This is not a war of pride or power. This is a promise. The fleet formed into lines. Fighters launched, engines roared, and the silence of space was broken. The human fleet entered the Varana system like a silent wave. The stars behind them faded, and ahead of them, a broken world waited. The Tenari homeworld was no longer the green and peaceful planet it had once been. Smoke covered its sky. Cities had fallen. Fires glowed in the night. From space, the damage was clear. Craters stretched across fields. Rivers were black with ash. Whole forests were gone. The beauty of Varana was now hidden under ruin. Inside the command ship Iron Glance, Commander Rovan stood before the large screen. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. Around him, his officers moved quickly, checking every system. Zarkeen ships ahead, Mila said. 17 war cruisers in orbit. Heavy weapons. No signs of retreat. They will not run, Rovan said. They think no one will fight them here. He turned to his crew. Let's prove them wrong. The human fleet moved into formation. Large ships stayed back, preparing their long-range weapons. Smaller ones raced forward, weaving through debris and wreckage. Fighters launched from carriers, like arrows. At the front was the Skyhammer, led by Captain Relo. His ship was heavy and slow, but it carried the strongest plasma cannons in the fleet. He stood at the center of his bridge, calm as stone. "Lock targets," he ordered. "Fire at will." The sky lit up. Blue beams crossed the blackness of space. Human cannons fired with silent power. Zarkeen ships responded with their own weapons, red and sharp, cutting through the dark like blades. One human cruiser took a direct hit. Its engines failed, and smoke filled its side. But the crew stayed calm. Emergency systems worked fast. Other ships moved to protect it. This was not a surprise attack. This was a battle. In the middle of the fight, a group of small fighters led by pilot Yair moved between enemy lines. His fighter was fast, quiet, and armed with twin plasma darts. He flew like a shadow, cutting through space without sound. He spotted a Zarkeen command pod hiding behind a large cruiser. "There you are," he whispered. He moved low, dodging enemy fire, then sent 2 darts straight into the pod. It exploded in silence, leaving only pieces. Yair turned his ship and flew back toward the fleet. One less to worry about, he said to himself. Below, on the surface of Varana, the Tanari huddled in their shelters. They could hear the deep rumble of battle above. The ground shook with every strike. Many were silent. Some cried. Others just waited. In the valley shelter, Evera held the radio close. She listened as human voices reported positions, gave orders, and called for medical ships. "They are here," she whispered. Laron, the old technician, stood beside her. "They came for us." Evara nodded. "I did not think anyone would." A loud sound shook the valley. A Zarkeen fighter crashed into a nearby hill. Smoke rose again. The danger was still near. But for the first time, Evara was not afraid. Back in orbit, the tide of battle began to change. The human ships fought with skill and focus. Each move was planned. Each shot was counted. The Zarkeen, used to easy wins, began to lose ground. Inside the Iron Glance, Mila gave a report. 4 enemy ships destroyed. 3 more retreating. The rest are holding their position near the northern pole. "Are they protecting something?" Rovan asked. Mila zoomed in the map. "There is a command base on the surface, likely a control point for their attack." Rovan looked at the screen for a moment. "Prepare a landing team. We are going down." Within minutes, landing crafts were launched. Troop carriers, medical shuttles, and scout drones moved through the thick atmosphere of Varana. The sky was full of smoke and fire, but the pilots stayed on course. Rovan himself led the first team. His armor was heavy but strong. The symbol of Earth was on his shoulder. His voice came through every speaker in the landing group. "We land. We hold and we protect. No Tanari shelter will fall today." His craft landed near the valley where Evara was hiding. The doors opened, and human soldiers stepped into the ruined world. The Tanari stared at the figures in metal suits. Their eyes were wide with wonder and fear. Then, Rovan stepped forward, removed his helmet, and looked at Ivara. "We are here to help," he said. Ivara looked at his face, rough and serious but not unkind. She took a slow breath and nodded. "There are injured," she said, "and children. Many are hiding nearby." Rovan turned to his team. "Secure this area. Set up a field station. No harm comes here." Medical teams moved fast. Supplies were unloaded. Water was given. Wounds were treated. A force shield was placed around the valley. This was no longer just a shelter. It was now safe ground. Far above, the last Zarkeen ship tried to escape. It turned from the fight and rushed toward the edge of the system, but the Skyhammer was ready. Captain Relo gave the final order. "Stop them." The main cannon fired, a silent flash, and the last enemy ship broke into pieces. The space around Varana grew quiet. The battle was over. That night, under a sky still filled with smoke, Ivara walked to the edge of the valley. She looked up and saw the lights of human ships above. She heard laughter from the children for the first time in days. Beside her, Rovan stood with his helmet in his hands. "You came when no one else did," she said. "We were late," Rovan replied, "but not too late." She smiled, a small one, but real. "You did not bring a message. You brought hope." Rovan looked at the stars above and nodded. "And now we bring peace." The battle over Varana was over, but the war was not finished. The planet lay wounded. Cities were in ruins. Fields were scorched. And the Tanari people faced a long road to recovery. Commander Rovan stood on a hill overlooking the valley where humans and Tanari now lived side by side. The sun was rising over the damaged land, casting soft orange light on the smoke still rising from distant fires. Beside him, Ivara moved quietly, her eyes scanning the horizon. She was tired, but hope had returned. "We saved the valley," she said softly. "But what about the rest of the world?" Rovan looked at the sky, then back to the broken cities. "We will rebuild," he said, "one step at a time." The human fleet stayed in orbit, acting as guardians against any return of the Zarkeen. Their presence was a sign. Varana was no longer alone. On the ground, soldiers, engineers, and medical teams worked alongside the Tanari. They cleared rubble, repaired shelters, and rebuilt communications. Ten, the young engineer from Europa, was one of many who rolled up his sleeves. He worked on restoring power to a damaged Tanari hospital. His hands were steady as he connected wires and tested circuits. "Almost done," he said to a Tanari nurse nearby. She smiled, a small, tired smile. "Thank you. This will save many lives." 10 nodded. "We are here to help." In the command ship, Rovan held daily meetings with his officers. Plans were made for food supplies, medical care, and protection. Every decision was shared with the Tanari leaders. One of the Tanari council members, Jera, visited the command room. She was tall, with silver skin and calm eyes. She spoke carefully but with strength. "We have lost much," she said. "But your arrival gave us hope. The people believe again," Rovan nodded. "We will not leave until you are safe." Jera smiled. "Your people have a strong heart, like ours." But the danger was not gone. Reports came from nearby systems. Small groups of Zarkeen soldiers were still active. They tried to sneak into Tanari territory to find hidden survivors or disrupt the rebuilding. Rovan made quick decisions. "Deploy patrols," he ordered. "No enemy will move without notice." Pilots flew fast through the skies. Scouts moved silently across forests. The humans and Tanari shared information and worked as one team. In one patrol, Pilot Yer flew low over a forest. Suddenly, his sensors picked up movement. A group of Zarkeen soldiers was trying to hide. Yer called for backup. Together, they surrounded the enemy. The Zarkeen surrendered quickly, surprised by the teamwork. Yer smiled. Not today. Life began to grow again in the valley. Children played in the fields. Gardens were planted. New buildings rose from the ashes. Evara taught healing classes, sharing knowledge between Tanari and human medicines. She found herself learning from the human doctors, just as they learned from her. One day, while working with Mila, the human communication officer, Evara asked, "How do you keep hope in your world?" Mila smiled gently. "We remember what it feels like to be afraid and alone. So when others cry for help, we listen. We act." Evara nodded. "That is why you came." "Yes," Mila said, "because no one should fight alone." But rebuilding was not only work, it was also learning. Tanari children asked many questions about humans. Their faces showed curiosity and surprise. "Why do you wear heavy armor?" one child asked. "To protect ourselves," Relo explained, when he visited the valley. "Our home is dangerous, but we carry our shield with us." The children laughed. "Your shields are like a second skin," Relo smiled. "Maybe so." In the evenings, under the soft light of twin moons, Tanari and humans shared stories. They sang songs from their worlds. They told of heroes and dreams. Ivara and Rovan sat together near a small fire. She asked, "Will your people stay long?" Rovan looked at the stars. "As long as we are needed," he said. "We fight for peace, not for power. And sometimes that means being far from home." Ivara smiled softly. "I never thought we would see help like this." "Neither did we," Rovan said. "But now we know what we must do." They sat quietly. Around them, the future was being built, one step at a time. One morning, alarms sounded across the valley. Scouts had spotted a large Zarkeen force moving toward Varana. The humans quickly prepared defenses. Soldiers readied weapons. Ships stood by in orbit. Rovan gathered his officers. "This will be the real test," he said. "We have learned to fight together. Now we prove that together we are stronger." The fleet formed lines in space. On the ground, Tanari and humans stood side by side. The sky grew dark with enemy ships, but the light of hope shone brighter. The dawn was cold and gray over the Varana Valley. The air was thick with tension. Soldiers and civilians alike moved quickly but silently. The calm before the storm stretched wide over the broken land. Commander Rovan stood in the center of the command tent. Around him, officers checked weapons, maps, and communications. Outside, Tanari warriors and human soldiers prepared for battle together. Rovan's voice was steady, but strong. "Today, we face those who wish to take our home again. They believe we are weak, but we are not. Together, we stand as one. He looked at Evera, who stood nearby holding a small child's hand. She nodded quietly. We fight not only for ourselves, she said, but for every life that needs hope. Far above, the human fleet formed sharp lines in space. Captain Relo stood on the bridge of the Skyhammer, eyes locked on the enemy ships. They are coming fast, Relo said. Weapons ready. Shields up. The fleet was larger now than before. New ships had arrived from nearby systems. Every pilot knew the cost of failure. Hold steady, Relo ordered. Remember what we fight for. The enemy fleet appeared like a storm. Black ships filled the horizon, moving quickly toward Varana. Zarkeen warships, larger and more numerous than before, formed tight groups. The space between them and the human fleet crackled with energy. As the distance closed, the first shots were fired. Bright plasma beams crossed the void, striking ships and exploding into clouds of debris. Rovan watched from the iron glance. We will not fall, he said to Mila. Every inch of this system is ours to defend. On the surface, the Tenari and humans waited. Defensive lines had been set. Heavy weapons and turrets covered the hills and valleys. The ground shook as Zarkeen dropships opened their bays, sending troops down into the battle. Rovan stepped outside the command tent, his armor heavy but strong. He looked at the soldiers and warriors gathering. "Hold your ground!" he shouted. "Fight with honor!" The Tenari warriors raised their weapons, their eyes fierce. Human soldiers checked their rifles and charged energy shields. The Zarkeen ground forces spread quickly. They moved with deadly speed. Their weapons fired bursts of glowing energy. The fighting was fierce, but the defenders held. Tenari warriors used their knowledge of the land. They led the enemy into traps and ambushes. Humans covered the open fields with heavy fire. Together they pushed back the attackers. In space, the battle reached its peak. The human fleet surrounded the enemy ships, firing volleys of plasma and missiles. Captain Relo piloted the Skyhammer close to a massive Zarkeen cruiser. He ordered a full-power shot. The cannon fired, a brilliant blue beam that cut through the enemy's armor. The cruiser exploded in a flash of light. Around him, other human ships fought with courage and skill. Fighter pilots like Yare darted through the battle, striking quickly and disappearing before the enemy could respond. Back on the ground, Rovan led a small squad to reinforce a weakened position. The air was thick with smoke and dust. The sound of battle was everywhere. As they moved forward, they found Tenari civilians trapped under rubble. Rovan ordered the soldiers to help carry them to safety, while the warriors provided cover. "We protect all who need it," he said firmly. The battle was long and hard. Many fell, but the defenders never gave up. Hours passed. The sun rose higher, burning away the smoke and clouds. Finally, the Zarkeen began to retreat. Their ships pulled back into the shadows of space. Their ground troops fell back to their dropships. Commander. Rovan watched them go. "We held," he said quietly. "We stood as one." After the battle, silence returned to Varana. The valley was scarred, but alive. The people who survived gathered around the humans and Tenari leaders. Ivara spoke to the crowd. "Today we saw the power of unity. Together we defended our home. Together we will rebuild a future where no one cries for help in silence." Rovan stepped forward. "Humans and Tenari," he said, "this is only the beginning. We fight for peace. We stand for hope. We are one." In the quiet moments after the fight, Yar sat by the edge of a river, watching the water flow. He thought about the battle and what had brought them here. He smiled softly. "Help came when it was needed," he said, "not with anger, but with strength and heart." The stars above twinkled brightly. The future was uncertain, but for now, hope was alive. The battle was over, but the journey was not finished. Varana's skies were still smoky, and the ground still bore scars of war. Yet among the ruins, a new hope was growing. Commander Rovan stood on the highest hill overlooking the valley. The sun was rising, painting the world in soft gold. Beside him, Evera watched the horizon with quiet eyes. "We fought hard," Rovan said. "But now we must build more than defenses. We must build a future." Evera nodded. "The people need more than protection. They need a home, a life." The human fleet remained in orbit, acting as guardians. Their presence was a promise to the Tenari. Help would never leave, not while it was needed. Below, humans and Tenari worked side by side. The damaged cities slowly grew again. Walls were rebuilt. Fields were planted with fresh seeds. Schools open to children eager to learn. Ten, the engineer from Europa, supervised the repair of a power station. He smiled as lights flickered back on in the nearby town. "Every light is a victory," he said. A Tenari woman beside him, named Lyra, agreed. "Your people brought more than weapons. You brought hope." In the valley, the children played. Their laughter was a song new to the broken land. They chased one another beneath the twin moons. They asked questions about the stars and the humans who had come to save them. Evara taught the children alongside the human medics. She found joy in small things: a healed wound, a shared story, a quiet smile. One evening, as stars began to shine, Rovan joined her by the fire. "Will we ever go home, Go?" Evara asked. Rovan looked up at the sky. "Home is where we are needed. For now, this is our home." Evara smiled softly. The Tenari leaders gathered with the human commanders in the command tent. Plans were made for the future. Trade routes would open. Knowledge would be shared. Jera, the silver-skinned council member, spoke with strength and hope. "Our worlds have joined, not just in war, but in friendship." Rovan agreed. "Together we are stronger. We face whatever comes next as one." Yet peace was not simple. Challenges remained. The land was still harsh. The wounds of war deep. Some Tenari were cautious, afraid that the Zarkeen might return. Others were hopeful, ready to trust and rebuild. Rovan and Evara worked to bring people together. They held meetings, listened to concerns, and shared stories of courage. "We cannot erase the past," Rovan said, "but we can write a new future." Far above, new ships arrived from Earth and other human worlds. They brought supplies, tools, and people who wished to help. Pilot Yair flew missions delivering aid to distant settlements. He marveled at how the Tenari had changed. "They are strong," he said, "not because of power, but because of heart." Months passed. The valley transformed. Gardens bloomed where fire had burned. Schools rang with laughter. New homes rose from the ashes. The Tenarian humans held a festival under the stars. They sang songs, shared food, and celebrated their new friendship. Rovan and Ivara stood together, watching the joy around them. "This is what we fought for," Ivara said. "Peace," Rovan replied, "and the promise of tomorrow." One clear night, Rovan looked up at the stars again. He thought about Earth, about home. But here, on Varana, he had found something else. A purpose. A family. He smiled and whispered, "We are not alone." The stars seemed to shine brighter. A new dawn had come for Varana and its people. A dawn built on courage, hope, and unity. And this time, no one would be left to cry for help in silence. End of story.